Hello, good morning and welcome to the Sunday Supplement. It's great to be back and a happy Christmas to you all. It won't be a happy Christmas though for Mark Hughes. He's out at Manchester City. Roberto Mancini is in and the players are not happy. Did Hughes deserve to be sacked? We'll find out from Sam Wallace, the football correspondent of The Independent. Steve Bates is the chief football writer of The People and Neil Ashton is here. He's the chief football correspondent of the News of the World. No guessing where all the headlines go this morning in the Sunday newspapers. Neil's name's on this story. Revolt. The players not happy with the sacking of Hughes. They confronted members of the board last night after the decision. They're saying that Craig Bellamy led the revolt. If you turn to the Sunday Mirror, it's Shay Given that led the revolt. But the same message, we're not happy with the sacking of Hughes. This is the Sunday Telegraph. City sack Hughes and set Mancini top 4 target to make the job his own. Well, he's got a 3.5 contract. Top 4 this season. What happens if he's not? Will he get the sack as well? Sparky stuffed is the Sunday People. That's Steve's paper. Hughes axed. The same message everywhere. This is the Mail on Sunday. Little interesting twist here on the Sunday Express. Bye-bye, Mark, of course. But up here, they've got Rafa Benitez indicating that he might be the next manager to be sacked after that shock 2-0 defeat at Portsmouth yesterday. Same message for Rafa in the Daily Star Sunday. Rafa is a red man walking, they say. Just turning to the Premier League, other stories. They're the Portsmouth players celebrating their 2-0 victory over Liverpool. Bottom of the Premier League, well, they might just escape that if they continue that kind of performance. This is Wayne Rooney holding his head. United sunk by Zamora. 3-0 United lost at Fulham. No defenders, but the performance wasn't good enough. And Sir Alex here saying, I hope this will not cost us the title. We'll have a look at the top of the Premier League and who will finish in the top 4 a little bit later on. And this is Arsenal beating Hull 3-0. But there was incidents there, no love lost between those clubs. But there's only one place to start, Neil. You were at Eastlands yesterday. How, in fact, did all the drama unfold with Mark Hughes? When were the journalists aware that he was going to be sacked? And when did he realise, do you think? And also, this player revolt, how did that happen?
I think that the Hughes situation has been brewing for some time. I think he knew he was walking a tightrope after their 7th successive draw in the Premier League, which was against Hull. And he was operating on a game-by-game basis ever since. They then beat Arsenal in the Carling Cup. They beat Chelsea in the Premier League. They recovered from a goal down to beat them 2-1 at Eastlands. And I think everybody thought that his job was safe, but it was business as usual for Man City against Bolton last week. And then the defeat at Tottenham, that was the final straw for Gary Cook and the football administrator, Brian Marwood. And the decision was made fairly rapidly that Roberto Mancini, who's available after finally agreeing a severance package from Inter Milan, would take over.
When you arrived at the game, though, did you think this is his last match?
Yeah, it was done and dusted by then. And Mark Hughes, more importantly, Mark Hughes and his coaching staff arrived at that game knowing that it was his last game in charge. He'd already taken advice from the League Managers Association. They'd told him to take charge of that, because the obvious thing to do would be to say, I'm not taking charge. What's the point? I know I've been sacked. I know I'm about to be sacked. I know that a replacement has already been lined up. He knew all that detail when he arrived at the ground with his players yesterday. Now, the advice that was given on legally would be to take charge of the game and allow the situation to unfold, which is exactly what it did after the game.
After the match, I mean, the crowd, no reaction to Hughes during the game?
None at all, no. It was very subdued, and you could see by the body language of Mark Hughes that his team raced into a 2-goal lead, but there was no excitement. There wasn't a buzz of anticipation around Manchester or the club yesterday. The only anticipation was, when is this going to happen? How soon after this game will the club announce that Mark Hughes has left?
What was the club's attitude afterwards? Were they cooperative? Did they tell you straight away that he was sacked?
They were cooperative. They're in a very, very difficult position. I think the people who work in the communications department, and 2 of them weren't there yesterday, one of them was, they've been put in an unenviable situation, because the person who should have actually talked to the journalists yesterday would have been the chief executive, Gary Cook, but he was nowhere to be seen. That would have been the ideal person to come down and explain, perhaps for 5 or 10 minutes, precisely why Manchester City have sacked their manager after they've beaten Sunderland 4-3 at home, because they should have done it before. The decision was made before the game.
Sam, do you think that Mark Hughes deserved to be sacked? More than £200 million on players, only there 18 months, only lost twice this season.
My personal view is no. I think he was trying to do something different at City. I realise that the fans were frustrated with the results, and some of them were bad results. There's no two ways about it. But he was attempting to do something quite fundamental at the club and change it from the bottom up and change the way the academy worked, change the whole structure of the club, which has had a losing mentality for years, which has been a kind of calamitous football club. And I think a job like that takes time. I mean, Alex Ferguson inherited a pretty sort of ropey Manchester United 23 years ago, and it took him time to do it. Unfortunately, 23 years ago, you got more time, you don't anymore. And I feel really sorry for Mark Hughes, but I think the worst thing about his sacking was the way it was done. I think it was handled appallingly. For him to go out there knowing that he'd lost his job, and for no one at City to have the bottle to front up, as Neil said, and explain the decision was appalling. It reminded me of Martin Jol's sacking when Tottenham were playing in the UEFA Cup, and everyone in the stadium knew he was gone, and the guy's out there on the touchline. You know, it's embarrassing, it's painful for him. I just think it smacks of a club that's just not very well organised.
And his family, because Mark Hughes' wife was in the stand yesterday, and she was sat in the same row as Brian Kidd, and I think relations are pretty frosty between the Hughes household and the Kidd household right now, because Brian Kidd was sat in the same row as Mrs. Hughes, and he knew that he was the club's new assistant manager.
And how can a club make an announcement? I think it was at half-time that there would be an announcement at 7:30. Yes. I mean, that smacks of people who don't know how football works.
Yeah.
I mean, to say that at half-time when the club is still involved in a game, I think however you feel about Hughes and the arguments for and against keeping him, he deserves to be treated with more dignity than that, and it was a bad day for City.
There were reports, Steve, that it was a few weeks ago when Mancini actually shook on it after the Carling Cup match again, or the Carling Cup quarter-final against Arsenal, which they won, of course.
Well, I think this has been, as Neil says, it's been brewing for a while. Obviously came to a head yesterday, Friday evening. I think Mancini's people were saying that this was nearly a done deal. But the fact that Gus Hiddink's agent came out and admitted to speaking to Gary Cook about Gus Hiddink's position. Clearly, this has been going on for several weeks. I'm sure Mark Hughes, you know, football's a small kind of pool.
He's not stupid, is he?
He would have known that you know, he was running out of time, and you know, very embarrassing for Gary Cook to be outed in the way that he was by Gus Hiddink's agent, sort of saying that there'd been an approach.
What will be disappointing for Mark, though, is that he has already confronted Gary Cook and said, "Am I in jeopardy? Is my job in danger?"
How long ago was that?
They said after the whole game,
right.
The morning after the whole game, and he was told, "No, your job's safe. Ignore newspaper speculation. It's just not true." Actually, what they should have done and said, "Do you know what, Mark? 7 successive draws, and you won your first 4 games in the Premier League this season. We were level with Chelsea. People were talking about us winning the Premier League title, and rightly so after spending £250 million on a team. They should have fronted him up and said 7 successive draws isn't good enough. Of course, we're looking at other options. Start winning football matches and you're safe."
What was it Gary Cook said that about Kaká? He bottled it.
He bottled it.
It seems to me that Gary Cook's bottled it.
He has, yeah. And his behaviour over the last few weeks, he was after the Chelsea game, he was in a Cheshire nightclub with the Manchester City players, enjoying a pretty good night out, ordering champagne for them and celebrating in a way that only players know how to celebrate. Well, Gary Cook certainly had a good night out with his players and was telling them that this is the result that could turn our season and they can finish in the top 4. Well, 2 weeks later he sacked the manager.
Why Mancini? How many choices down the line do you think he was? I mean, Hiddink obviously was approached. Mourinho's been linked with the job.
He has.
For as long as we can remember. But Mancini's, he's been around the Premier League clubs. He was linked with Chelsea, wasn't he? Do you remember?
Yeah.
His agent's obviously been busy, and now he's got a 3.5-year contract at the richest club in the world.
I think what you can say about Mancini, he does have a track record of winning 3 successive titles at Inter Milan, 4 Italian Cups while he was there as well, in the space of 4 years. So it was a pretty productive spell for him at Inter. But it all unravelled for him because he couldn't do it in the Champions League, and there was a particular defeat, I think, at Liverpool that kind of sealed his fate there with Massimo Moratti, the Inter chairman. But quite clearly, they've identified, I think, Brian Marwood probably is one of the key figures in all of this, because the Abu Dhabi people, obviously, who own Manchester City, are business people. They're not football people.
Yeah.
You know, I think they were happy to go along supporting Hughes as long as he had support elsewhere in the club. But it's quite clear, as Neil's alluded to, that Gary Cook and Brian Marwood kind of... there was a sea change there. They decided he had to go. And obviously they've identified Mancini. Now, whether Mancini can... They've given him a 3.5-year contract, so...
it was £3 million a year?
Yeah.
Around that?
Yeah.
He also gets £1 million if he wins a trophy. Well, they're in the semi-final of the Carling Cup.
That's
and £1 million if they finish in the top 4.
And the timing maybe of this is that with the January transfer window coming up, maybe City's sort of board did not want to entrust another 40, 50, 60 million to Mark Hughes, knowing quite clearly that he wasn't going to be the manager for the future.
Yeah. I mean, you have somebody like Mancini, but what happens if he doesn't finish in the top 4 this season?
Well, City have now become the kind of club which Chelsea fell into the trap where things go wrong, let's sack the manager.
Yeah.
And all we ever hear about is how clubs need continuity, they need stability. The two most successful managers in our game, one's been there 23 years, Fergie, and Arsene Wenger's been there 30 years. And yet, all these clubs who take United or Arsenal as a template, they then seem to, as soon as things go wrong, they sack the manager. And I don't think Mancini is right. I know he's won 3 titles, but one of them was given to Inter because of the Moggi scandal. The other 2 were won because Juventus and AC Milan were weakened because of the sanctions against them. He's not... I don't put him in the top tier of managers. He's not a real sort of jaw-dropping appointment in the way that a Mourinho or a Hiddink would have been. And he's been around... I mean, he's been unemployed for more than a season now. I think a few clubs have had a look at him. Chelsea have had a look at him. And
I think he was linked to QPR at one
well,
stage.
That's a hell of a leap, isn't it?
North QPR
well.
Yeah,
precisely.
Because he's Sven's big mate, isn't he?
So I don't really see it as a kind of stunning appointment. And he's going to have to come in and learn a lot about English football very quickly.
He doesn't speak great English. He's having English lessons, isn't he?
Well, he could maybe get the person who taught Fabio Capello to teach English to help him out. I mean, I don't really see this as a brilliant, bold appointment. I just see it as a bit of as they're desperate to get rid of Hughes for whatever reasons people like Cook and Marwood had for that, and it was pretty much who can we get? Middle of the season, not great planning. I don't think it's a very sort of well thought through plan, to be honest.
Is this what happens with the kind of ownership that a club like City have? You know, massive amounts of money. Money doesn't matter to them at all. All they want to see is the bells jingling at the top of the Premier League and also winning something. So if someone doesn't deliver, out he goes. We'll get somebody else.
Well, it certainly does seem that money solves any problem, and Manchester City, I think they deserve better because they're a club that for years and years have had to, well, possibly since they won their last title in 1968, have lived in the shadow of United. And I think the fans expected things to be different. And yet there does seem this element of chaos about them, which you always associated with previous City regimes.
Yeah.
There has been a huge restructure at the club. And as you alluded to before, you know, Mark Hughes has tried to do that. But when you're spending vast amounts of money, there's only one thing that matters, and that's results. And 2 wins in 11 is clearly, for the standard of player City have at the club, it was clearly not good enough.
But no time given, though, is there? I mean, 18 months is not a huge amount of time.
But he wasn't their man, was he, Brian, at the end,
No,
of the
exactly.
day?
I think that's...
You know, he suffered in a similar way Sam Allardyce did at Newcastle when he was already manager when Mike Ashley came in at the club. When you're not somebody's man, there's always an element of doubt there that you will have any longevity at the club.
Could the players have done more for him, do you think? I mean, I watched the defeat at Spurs. Robinho and Adebayor, I thought were disgraceful in that match, and he dropped them both, didn't he? He wondered whether that was just his last message. You know, OK, well, you're not playing, you haven't done it for me.
Both of them were on the bench yesterday as well.
Yeah.
And Hughes made 3 substitutions and didn't use either Adebayor. And he actually put Martin Petrov on to replace Craig Bellamy. So it said everything.
That was the message, wasn't it?
Oh, it said everything. The one player who's been a huge disappointment is the captain, Kolo Touré. His mistake yesterday for Sunderland's 2nd goal.
Yeah.
For a player of his class, and he made the move from Arsenal to go, a bold move to go to Manchester City. But when Arsene Wenger has decided that players are no longer of any use to him, I can't think, beyond Thierry Henry, who's gone on to win a Champions League winners' medal with Barcelona, I can't think of too many more who've gone on to be great successes elsewhere.
And how much did he get for Touré? What, 16 million or something?
Yeah, 16 million and another 25 for Adebayor. And Adebayor is a player who causes City will tell you till they're blue in the face that Adebayor hasn't caused a single problem since he's been at the club. Well, he's already been banned for 3 games for stamping on Robin van Persie in the league game at Eastern.
Well, his biggest contribution is upsetting Arsenal fans.
Yeah, that's right.
So far this
season. He has scored goals, but in recent weeks, his own goal against Liverpool, it looks like an accident, but it's almost, you actually could have done a bit more about that. And,
do we think that Robinho now will stay, or do you think Robinho will go in the transfer window?
I think he will go because I think he wants to. He wants to.
Well, he's given such loyalty to City already, hasn't he? I mean, giving them a great.
He said last week he'd stay for 5 or maybe
yes.
even 10 years. So.
Yeah,
he is the kind of player that can get a manager the sack because, and clearly that's happened here with Mark Hughes. In that, you know, when you have a player of that ability who costs that money, you do expect more from him, and his performances. You know, he turns it on when he wants to, and you simply cannot have players like that. And, you know, I think for me, the 2 players that probably have done more for Manchester City in the last few months are Shea Given and Craig Bellamy.
Yeah.
2 kind of unsung players, and you know, we hear behind the scenes Adebayor, he's not well in training, he's a bit kind of moody, and this, that, and the other. And clearly, when you throw together that many big personalities who cost a lot of money, it takes some management, and you know, obviously Mark Hughes will not get the chance to do that, but.
This thing about player revolt, and you often get this when a manager goes, especially by the players, would that worry Mancini? I mean, he's meeting them today, we understand, and he's being introduced to the media tomorrow. Players like Bellamy and Shea Given have gone, you know, to Gary Cook and said, look, what's going on, we don't like it. Does that pass very quickly?
Listen, I think players are very selfish at the end of the day. As long as they're being paid, really, there's no real sort of difference who's managing them. I think they'll feel some sympathy for Hughes, but, you know, footballers quickly move on, don't they? And you know,
it's such a fast-moving industry. I think more than anything, they'll have seen the writing on the wall for Hughes for some time. But I think the manner and the way it's done, it wasn't a dignified exit yesterday for Mark Hughes. And I think that alone will be the single biggest complaint among Manchester City's players. But they have to meet. They know they've now got a new manager. They can't change that. They're not going to be able to. They don't have that. They've got power, but not that much power.
Yeah.
Mancini is the new manager, and they'll move on pretty swiftly. And also, it's the January transfer window. It starts in 2 weeks' time. He'll make his own changes anyway.
Yeah, having been promised a lot of money to get people in that he thinks he needs to. Is Brian Kidd a good appointment? He's been on the staff, but in the back room somewhere, hasn't he?
Yeah, just for a few weeks since he left Portsmouth. But obviously, I'm sure he will know Mancini from Brian Kidd. Is kind of a very astute guy. He looks at sort of training methods in other countries. I'm sure he will know Mancini from coaching seminars and what have you. So. As Neil was saying before, maybe it's no coincidence that he's now gone in as Mancini's number 2.
Just on the signings that Hughes made, I mean, we mentioned Toure and Lescott for £26 million, but he lets Dunn go. And people can question that. Defensively, City all over the place, conceding goals, and you've got somebody here that he lets go, having a great season with Villa.
Yeah, it's the beauty of hindsight a bit. I mean, Dunn last season didn't have his best year, but he's fundamentally a good footballer, and he's come back this year. I think the great interview that Dunn gave when he was on Ireland duty, he was more caustic about Gary Cook and about how he'd treated him. And there was that famous quote that Richard Dunn doesn't shift shirts in Beijing, which Gary Cook has said many things that will come back to haunt him. I think that's probably right up there at the top of the list. I mean, of all these signings, when you look at the likes of Adebayor and Robinho, and I was at White Hart Lane this week, and they were awful. I think when you sack a manager in this way, it says something very clear to the players, and it says something to players like Robinho. It says, if things go wrong, don't worry. It won't be you. It won't be you that gets moved on. It'll be the manager.
Yeah.
And that is a real malaise among modern English football clubs. And again, the only 2 clubs where it doesn't happen, Manchester United and Arsenal, it's the manager that stays and the players that move on.
Yeah.
That's how it should be.
Under the control of the manager.
And if you want a successful team, if you want a successful club, the manager has to be all-powerful. Real Madrid have proved it year in, year out, that just by undermining the manager, by constantly moving him on, you don't have success. You know, it doesn't work. And again, you go back to the template of Ferguson and Wenger. You have to have that power. Players have to have that fear. This guy could sell me.
Yeah.
You know, that's what makes a successful club. Not when Adebayor and Robinho just give up and then know that it'll be Hughes out in a week. We'll play for the next guy.
They behave like they're doing Manchester City a favour by playing for them, and the moment you've got players like that on the books, it's time to let them go. And you see that with Manchester United and players. Well, as soon as it happens at Arsenal, I think there's a sea change, and Henry was one of those players. He felt like he was doing them a favour by playing for them. Well, Wenger quickly recognised it a season too late, of course. Probably should have moved him on a little the season after the season they lost the Champions League final. But the moment they do that, it's all over for a player. Or it should be.
Yeah, I agree. Steve Bruce came out last night and said it was a very sad day, not just for Hughes, but for management. What encouragement does it give to young managers coming through? Because, OK, another foreign managers come into the Premier League, but it's the conveyor belt. No success, bang, out.
Precisely. And Hughes was a British manager who'd served his time. He did a great job with Wales. On very limited resources at Blackburn, he did a good job. And yeah, you get 18 months, and then they turn to an expensive foreign coach who, to be fair, I mean, I still think Mancini. I think Mancini's a gamble. I really do.
I agree,
I don't think you're bringing in someone who knows the Premier League like Mourinho or Hiddink. I think you are really taking a chance on someone. I don't think it's been thought through.
Yeah.
And I just hope that Hughes' kind of stock isn't damaged by this long term. I hope people realise the clear problems that he's had to face. There's lots of people with different agendas at that club. And let's hope he gets another chance, because, of course, in Europe, people get recycled all the time. Coaches fail and they come back and it's fine. But, well, Mancini's a perfect example, so let's hope that he gets another chance.
He will, I think, as well.
What's sad for Hughes, though, is that he'll never... This was an opportunity where someone had come in unexpectedly, because the Abu Dhabi group hadn't taken over when he took the job.
Yeah.
And suddenly they're flush with cash. They can buy the best players in the world, or they thought they could buy the best players in the world. This was Hughes' big opportunity to really crack the big time and compete on a level playing field with Chelsea, Manchester United, and fight for that superiority. And also in Europe, he'll probably never get that chance again. He's got us now. Presumably he'll go away for some time, a little bit of reflection. He'll want to come back and he'll want to prove himself. But will he manage another club like Manchester City again?
No, I agree with that. Well, he'll certainly have to start back again underneath that. Yeah. What was his compensation figure? What would he get? Well,
he only had just over. He's got 18 months left on his contract. He's paid around £3-4 million a year. So financially, it won't be a problem for Manchester City to pay up Mark Hughes and the coaching staff. They fired all of them yesterday.
There's about 5 or 6 of them, isn't there, that he brought in. Last question, Mancini, does that guarantee top 4 place for City this season?
No, I don't think it does. No, as Sam said, he's a gamble, and he'll remain that because, you know, he's unproven in the Premier League, and City at the moment are a club in disarray. The team, they've spent a lot of money, but they're in disarray.
And you wonder what happens, Steve, if they don't finish in the top 4. What do the owners do then? Because, you know, no Champions League football, no money that goes to Champions League football. OK, it's the prestige as well. But you can imagine another change coming in the summer if that doesn't happen. But that's just the crazy thing, isn't it?